Some moments don't hit you right away. They sneak up quietly, and then change everything. That was what happened to Lena on that late autumn evening. She had no idea that a single sentence would shift the entire way she saw him. Or herself. The community center had been unusually crowded that night. Voices overlapped, laughter echoed, and people moved around in quick, noisy waves. Lena tried to keep up, but her mind wasn't in the room. She felt scattered. Unsteady. Like her thoughts kept slipping away no matter how hard she tried to hold them together. She stepped outside the meeting room, pretending she needed fresh air. Truthfully, she just needed peace. Silence. A moment without everyone asking if she was okay. She leaned against the hallway wall, letting her breathing slow. Her palms were cold. Her heartbeat was a little too loud. And she hoped, really hoped, that no one would follow her. But soft steps appeared behind her. She knew who it was even before he spoke. Only one person walked that gently. Only one person hesitated just long enough to decide whether she needed space or company. Evan. They had known each other for years. Not close the way people usually describe closeness. More like, quietly orbiting each other. Present, but never too near. He stopped a few steps away from her, respectful as always. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" She forced a small smile. The kind that looked fine from far away but not up close. "I'm just tired," she said. "Long day." Evan didn't move closer. He didn't rush to reassure her. He just stood there, watching her with that calm, steady patience she never quite understood. "It wasn't the day," he said quietly. Her breath caught. She didn't know why his words hit like that. Not sharp, but true. Too true. She swallowed. Then what was it? He hesitated again, his specialty. Choosing his words. Weighing them. Deciding whether it was his place to speak them at all. "You've been carrying too much," he said. "For a long time." A strange warmth rose in her chest. Not embarrassment. Not fear. Something gentler. Something she didn't have a name for. "You notice everything, don't you?" she whispered. He looked away for a moment, almost like he wasn't sure he should answer. Then he nodded. "I notice you," he said. Just 3 words. Simple. Quiet. Nothing dramatic. But they hit her harder than anything anyone had said in months. Her throat tightened, and she had to blink back the sting behind her eyes. Why would he notice? Why would he pay attention to a girl who spent most days fading into the background, doing her best not to take up space? "Evan," she said softly, "you don't have to." "I know," he cut in gently. "But I do." The hallway felt heavier suddenly. Not in a bad way. More like the air was holding something unspoken, something she was afraid to touch but even more afraid to ignore. She looked down at her hands. They trembled slightly. He noticed that, too. "Lena," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you don't have to pretend with me." Her breath shook. She wasn't used to people seeing the parts she tried to hide. She wasn't used to anyone looking closely enough to understand what she wasn't saying out loud. "How long have you known?" she asked. Evan took a slow breath, as if deciding how honest he was allowed to be. "A while," he admitted. "Longer than you think." Her heart thudded. Longer than she thought? What did that even mean? What had he seen? What had she accidentally revealed without realizing? Before she could ask another question, a door opened at the far end of the hallway. Voices spilled out again, breaking the quiet moment between them. Evan glanced toward the sound, then back at her almost reluctantly. "We don't have to talk about everything right now," he said. "But maybe we should talk. Soon." There was a softness in his eyes she had never noticed before. Or maybe she just never let herself look long enough to see it. Lena nodded slowly, unsure what words to give the moment. A small smile tugged at the corner of Evan's mouth. "Good," he said quietly. "Because I didn't want to leave things the way they were." Her pulse quickened. Leave things the way they were? What did he mean by that? Before she could ask, he stepped back, giving her space again. Respectful. Careful. Thoughtful in a way she wasn't sure anyone had ever been with her. If you're enjoying this story so far, Please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. And when he turned to walk away, she didn't know why. But something inside her whispered that this was just the beginning. Some moments don't fade when they're over. They echo. They linger. They follow you even when you try to walk away from them. That was what happened to Lena after Evan spoke those quiet, careful words. I notice you. She replayed them over and over as she walked back into the community center's main room. The lights felt too bright. The conversations felt too loud. Every familiar face suddenly felt unfamiliar. She couldn't stop thinking about him. Not in the dramatic, sweeping way stories usually describe, but in a softer, unsettling way she didn't know how to name. Evan had always been steady, reliable, easy to be around, but she never imagined he paid attention to her like that. She slipped into an empty seat near the back. She pretended to listen while people talked about schedules and plans, but all she really heard were echoes of that one moment in the hallway. She glanced across the room. Evan was standing near the center table, talking to someone. His posture was relaxed. His voice sounded light. But every now and then, he looked her way. Not staring. Not trying to make anything obvious. Just checking. Noticing. She felt her chest tighten again. Why would he? What did he see in her that she didn't see in herself? When the meeting ended, everyone started packing up. Chairs scraped across the floor. Bags zipped. People laughed as they said their goodbyes. Lena stayed seated until the room was almost empty. Part of her hoped Evan would come over again. Another part of her was terrified that he might actually do it. Eventually, she stood and made her way toward the door. Her hands were tucked inside her sleeves. Her steps slow. She assumed she would slip out quietly, but before she reached the exit, she heard a familiar voice behind her. Lena! She stopped. Evan jogged the last few steps to catch up, slightly breathless. It was the first time she had ever seen him look unsteady. Hey, he said, pushing his hair back with a nervous gesture. I wasn't sure if you had already left. She shifted her weight. I was trying to. A tiny smile touched his lips. Yeah, I noticed. There it was again. That word. Notice. It made her heartbeat jump in a way she couldn't control. He hesitated for a moment, then asked gently, do you want to walk out together? Lena almost said no. Not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't trust her voice to sound normal. Still, she nodded. They stepped out into the cool evening air. The sky was a deep blue, the kind that hinted at the start of winter. Streetlights glowed softly along the road. They walked in silence for a few seconds. Not uncomfortable. Just careful. Finally, Evan exhaled and said, about earlier. Lena's stomach tightened. He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit she recognized now that she was paying closer attention. I hope I didn't say too much, he said. Or make things weird. She shook her head quickly. No. You didn't. He let out a breath of relief. Good. I wanted you to know that you don't have to pretend. His voice softened on the last word. Pretend. The truth sank deeper this time. He really had seen more than she expected. I didn't think anyone noticed, she admitted. Evan glanced at her, his expression gentle. Most people don't. They look, but they don't really see. And you, do? She asked quietly. He nodded once. Yeah. I do. Her steps slowed. Why? Evan didn't answer right away. He looked ahead at the sidewalk, thinking. Choosing his words. He always chose his words. Because, he said finally, you always try to be strong. Even when you're hurting. And I guess I just pay attention to that more than I should. The last part slipped out before he could stop it. More than you should. Lena repeated softly. He winced slightly. Maybe that wasn't the right way to say it. No, she said. It was honest. He sighed, shoulders dropping. Okay, then, yeah. More than I should. A quiet breeze passed between them. Not cold. Just enough to make her aware of how close he was walking beside her. How long? She asked before she could stop herself. Evan looked over at her. His voice came out low. A long time. Her breath caught. A long time. Those words meant something. Something she wasn't sure she was ready to unpack. Something she wasn't sure she wanted to run from, either. They reached the corner where their paths split. Evan stopped first. "Lena," he said gently, "there are things I want to tell you. But only if you want to hear them." Her heart thudded in her chest. She wasn't sure she was ready. But she also wasn't sure she could walk away now. She met his eyes. "What kind of things?" she whispered. Evan took a slow breath. "The kind I probably should have said a long time ago." Her stomach fluttered. The moment stretched between them, soft and full of possibility. And just when he looked like he might finally say it, a car pulled up beside them, headlights washing over the sidewalk, interrupting the quiet moment completely. Lena startled. Evan stepped back instinctively. The moment shattered. But the question lingered in the air between them. What was he about to say? Some interruptions are small, barely noticeable, easy to move past. But some change everything. The headlights that flashed across Lena and Evan broke the moment so sharply that Lena actually stepped back. Her heart was still racing from whatever he had been about to say. The car slowed, then continued down the road without stopping. Just someone passing by. Nothing more. But the silence it left behind was heavy. Evan rubbed a hand across his forehead, almost frustrated with the interruption. He let out a slow breath, then looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Sorry," he said. That kind of ruined the moment. Lena shook her head quickly. "It's okay." Even though it really wasn't. He hesitated again, the way he always did when his thoughts were too big to fit into one breath. "I didn't want to rush what I was trying to say," he admitted. "I want to say it right." Her chest tightened. Right. What did right mean in this moment? What was he trying so hard to protect? She waited, giving him space to gather himself. But instead of speaking, he stepped back slightly and pointed toward the path that split off toward her street. "You should get home before it gets too late," he said softly. "But, can we talk tomorrow? Really talk this time? Tomorrow." That word settled inside her like a promise. A small, fragile one. But a promise nonetheless. She nodded. "Yeah. Tomorrow." He smiled, soft, relieved, and genuine. "Good. I'll see you then." He waited until she took a few steps down her path. Only then did he turn to walk his own way. And as Lena walked home, her heart continued to thud with questions she didn't know how to answer. What had he meant? What were the things he wished he'd said earlier? Why did it feel like something important was shifting between them? She reached her house, stepped inside quietly, and leaned against the door for a moment. Her thoughts were spinning, faster than she could catch them. It felt strange to realize that someone had been paying attention to her in ways she never imagined. Noticing her silence. Her tiredness. The heaviness she tried so hard to hide. Evan had seen her, really seen her, in a way that felt almost overwhelming. She went to her room, sat on the edge of her bed, and wrapped her arms around her knees. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet she usually welcomed. Tonight, it only made her thoughts louder. She replayed the conversation. His voice. His expression. The way he looked at her when he said he noticed her. There was something deeper there. Something he wasn't ready to say. Something she wasn't ready to hear. But tomorrow. Tomorrow might be different. She didn't sleep much that night. Her thoughts kept drifting back to him. By morning, she felt a mix of anticipation and worry curling in her chest. What if he changed his mind? What if she misread everything? What if the moment from last night had felt bigger to her than it did to him? Still, she found herself checking the time over and over. Waiting. Afternoon came. Then early evening. She was beginning to think he wouldn't show when suddenly, a soft knock sounded at her door. Her heartbeat jumped. She opened the door slowly, and there he was. Evan stood on her front step, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly tense. As if he wasn't sure whether she was ready for this conversation, or if he was. "Hey," he said softly. "I didn't want to bother you, but I meant what I said. I didn't want to leave things unspoken." Lena stepped aside so he could enter, but he shook his head gently. "Can we walk?" he asked. "I think better when I'm moving." She grabbed her light jacket and closed the door behind her. The air outside was cool, but refreshing. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the sun setting slowly. They walked down her street in calm, unhurried silence. After a minute, Evan spoke. "I owe you an explanation," he said quietly. "And I didn't want to wait too long, because I'm afraid if I wait, I'll lose the courage to say what I need to say." Lena's breath caught. He looked forward as he walked, not at her, almost as if eye contact would make the words too heavy to carry. "I've noticed things about you for a long time," he said. "Not the obvious things. The small things. The things most people overlook." She felt her cheeks warm. "Why?" she whispered. He slowed his pace, his voice turning almost fragile. "Because somewhere along the way, without meaning to, I started caring more than I should have." Lena stopped walking. Evan stopped too, turning toward her with quiet honesty in his eyes. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a breath. He opened his mouth to answer. But before he could say a single word, a sudden gust of wind rushed through the street, scattering leaves everywhere and forcing them both to shield their faces. When it passed, Evan looked shaken, like whatever he had tried to say had slipped through his hands again. But Lena's heart was pounding. He had finally said enough to reveal the truth she had been too afraid to name. He cared. More than he was supposed to. More than she ever expected. But how much more? And why did he look so scared to admit it? Some truths don't explode all at once. They unfold quietly, layer by layer. Like someone finally opening a door they kept locked for far too long. That was exactly what Lena felt as she stood on that windy street with Evan. He looked nervous. More nervous than she had ever seen him. As if the next words he spoke could change everything between them. And maybe they could. When the wind settled, Evan drew in a slow breath. "Lena," he said, voice steadying, "I want to explain. Really explain. But I need you to tell me if this conversation is okay. I don't want to say something you're not ready to hear." His gentleness hit her harder than anything else. Not pressure. Not urgency. Just care. "I'm okay," she said softly. "I want to understand." He exhaled, relieved, but still unsure. They started walking again, slower this time, as if the pace could make everything easier to say. "I didn't plan any of this," he began. "I didn't wake up one day and decide to pay attention to you. It just happened." Lena glanced at him. He kept his eyes forward, almost like looking at her would make the words too real. "I started noticing the way you shrink back when you're overwhelmed," he said. "The way you smile at people even when you're tired. The way you listen more than you talk. People forget how hard that is. But you do it every day." Her steps faltered. No one had ever said anything like that to her. Not in that calm, matter-of-fact way. Not with that kind of sincerity. Evan continued, voice low. "And when you walked out last night, I could see it in your eyes. You weren't just tired. You were carrying something heavy. I didn't know what it was, but I couldn't pretend I didn't see it." Lena took in a shaky breath. She wrapped her arms around herself. "What if you're reading too much into things?" she whispered. He finally looked at her, really looked at her. "I'm not," he said. "I've been reading the same things for too long to mistake them." Her heart fluttered. But there was something else in his expression. Something deeper. Something heavier. A truth he still hadn't said. They reached the small park near the end of the street. The swings moved gently in the cool air, empty and quiet. Evan led her toward a bench beneath the old maple tree, its branches swaying softly above them. They sat down, leaving enough space between them to breathe, but not so much that it felt distant. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Evan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. "I said I cared more than I should," he murmured. But that wasn't the full truth. Lena's pulse quickened. He hesitated again, collecting himself, preparing. "But before I say the rest," he added, "I need to know something." She swallowed hard. "What?" He turned toward her, eyes earnest and searching. Do you feel like you're alone in what you've been dealing with? The question caught her off guard. She opened her mouth to answer, but no sound came out. Because yes, she did feel alone. She felt alone all the time, even when surrounded by people. But hearing someone ask it so directly loosened something inside her, something she didn't realize she'd been holding tight. I don't tell people much, she admitted quietly. I'm not good at it. Evan nodded gently. I know. You know, she repeated, surprised. He smiled softly. Yeah. I've seen you push yourself through things without asking for help. I've watched you say I'm fine even when you don't mean it. I recognize it because I've done it too. The honesty in his voice made her chest tighten. You, she whispered. He nodded slowly. There was a time when I pretended everything was okay. For a long time. And people believed me. Everyone believed me. He took a steadying breath. Except you. Lena's eyes widened. Me? He nodded again. You didn't say anything. You never asked. But you looked at me one day and said, you seem tired. Her memory flashed. A quiet afternoon months ago. Evan had seemed off. She had simply noticed. That stuck with me, he said. Because no one else saw it. No one else even wondered. But you did. A soft silence settled between them. You saw me, he said quietly. Long before I ever admitted it. His words sank deep, warming something inside her she didn't know needed warmth. She tried to speak, but emotion caught in her throat. Evan leaned back slightly, giving her space. That's why I notice you, he said. And that's why I care more than I should. Her heart pounded in her ears. But the way he said it, soft, controlled, careful, told her there was still more. Something he wasn't sure he was allowed to reveal. She looked at him, gathering courage she didn't know she had. Evan, she whispered, if that's not the full truth, then what is? He lifted his head. His eyes were honest, open, vulnerable in a way she had never seen. The wind rustled the maple leaves above them, filling the space with a quiet hush. He parted his lips to speak. And before the words came out, his voice softened to almost a whisper. Lena, the real truth is. He paused, breath unsteady. It's more than caring. Her entire world went still. What did that mean? What was more than caring? He looked at her like he was standing on the edge of something he wasn't sure he was brave enough to cross. Her heart raced. She leaned in slightly, barely breathing. Evan, she whispered, tell me. He swallowed hard. I want to, he said. But I'm afraid of what happens after. His voice trembled. Not with fear of rejection. But with the weight of something deeper. Something final. Something he had been holding back for far too long. Some truths don't fit into a single moment. They tremble in your chest. They sit on the edge of your voice. They wait for the right breath, the right silence, the right courage. And Evan had finally reached the point where he couldn't keep his truth hidden anymore. He sat beside Lena beneath the maple tree, the evening light fading into soft shades of blue. His hands were clasped tightly, his shoulders tense, his breath uneven. Lena waited in quiet stillness. Not pushing. Not rushing. Just giving him the space he needed. Evan exhaled slowly, as if letting go of something heavy he'd carried far too long. I'm afraid, he said, because once I say this out loud, I can't take it back. Lena's breath caught. But she didn't look away. Whatever it is, she whispered, you can tell me. He lifted his gaze to hers. And in that moment, she saw everything he had been holding behind his careful silences, the worry, the hope, the tenderness he never named. Lena, he said, voice quiet but steady, it's not just that I care about you. The world seemed to still. It's that I've cared for a long time. More deeply than I meant to. More deeply than I thought I was allowed to. Her heart stuttered. He continued, the words finally flowing, fragile but honest. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. That I was imagining it. That I was reading too much into how I felt when you walked into a room, or how I could always tell when something was wrong, or how I'd notice every small change in you without trying. His voice softened. But it wasn't imagination. It wasn't a phase. It wasn't something I could reason away. He looked down, gathering what little courage he had left. The truth is, I care about you in a way that's more than friendship. I have for a long time. Lena's breath trembled as she exhaled. Not because she was startled, but because some part of her had known. Some quiet, unspoken part she never wanted to admit. She felt warmth rise in her chest. Gentle. Unexpected. Real. Evan's next words came softer than the whispering wind. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to lose what we already have. I didn't want things to become strange or heavy. You matter too much to me for that. She blinked, trying to steady her voice. Evan, why now? He met her eyes again, and this time there was no hesitation, no barrier, no careful distance. Because I saw how alone you felt last night, he said. And I realized that keeping this inside wasn't protecting you. It was just keeping me quiet when you deserved honesty. Lena felt her throat tighten with emotion. She wasn't used to anyone choosing to be honest for her sake. She wasn't used to being someone worth opening up to. She took a slow breath. I don't know what I'm supposed to say, she whispered. Evan nodded gently. You don't have to say anything tonight. I just want you to know how I feel. And I want you to know that I'm here not out of obligation, not out of habit, but because you matter to me more than I've been brave enough to admit. Silence settled between them again. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't heavy. It was full. Soft. Alive. Lena looked at him, really looked at him. The careful boy who walked quietly so he wouldn't overwhelm her. The boy who noticed what she didn't say. The boy who stood by her even when she tried to disappear into herself. The boy who confessed gently, like he was placing something fragile into her hands. And something inside her shifted. Slowly. Softly. Honestly. She reached out, barely brushing her fingers against his hand, a small, uncertain touch. Evan froze, not wanting to move too quickly, not wanting to read too much. But she didn't pull away. I don't have the perfect words right now, she murmured. I don't even know how to sort through everything I'm feeling. Evan nodded, every part of him listening. But I know this, she continued, her voice steady. You've never made me feel alone. Not once. And maybe I needed that more than I ever realized. His breath softened, hope flickering gently in his eyes. She looked down at their hands, just barely touching. I don't know what comes next, she admitted, but I want to find out. With you. Evan's quiet, relieved smile looked like someone seeing sunrise after a long night. He placed his hand over hers, slowly, gently, silently asking permission without words. This time, she didn't pull away. They sat there beneath the maple tree, letting the moment breathe. No rush. No pressure. Just two people finally speaking the truth they both carried for far too long. When they finally stood to walk home, they didn't walk apart. Their hands brushed again. And this time, they didn't pretend it was an accident. It wasn't a dramatic ending. It wasn't a grand confession under flashing lights. It was quiet. Real. Honest. A beginning disguised as an ending. And as Lena walked beside Evan, she realized something she had never let herself believe before. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't unnoticed. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. Thank you for listening to this story.